Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for calling this hearing. Mr. Isaacson, if I could just start with you. In March of 2024, you wrote, "The murder of a nursing student in Georgia has a lot of people on the right talking about migrant crime like it's an actual issue." That'd be Laken Riley you were talking about?
Laken Riley was an unusual case.
Yeah, here, let's have a look. Here's Laken Riley.
Yes.
Her murder, her horrific murder at the hands of this illegal migrant who was also unlawfully paroled in the United States. Her death, not an actual issue?
It's a tragedy.
But not an actual issue?
Migrant crime is much less of an issue than U.S. citizen-committed crime.
Not an actual issue? Those are your words. Her death, not an actual issue. I just want to get, no, you say.
Of course it's an issue. It's a tragedy.
So what do you mean by your
murder is an
post?
issue.
It's not an actual issue?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a heated Senate hearing led by Senator Josh Hawley, where he confronted a witness over some pretty controversial comments about migrant crime and border security. You won't want to miss this one. If you care about accountability and tough conversations in Washington, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you don't miss out. Let's get started. First up, Senator Hawley opened the hearing by addressing a heartbreaking case, the murder of nursing student Laken Riley in Georgia. She was killed by an illegal migrant who had been unlawfully paroled into the United States. Hawley didn't hold back when questioning Mr. Isaacson, who had previously written that migrant crime isn't an actual issue. Just think about that for a second. A young woman's tragic death dismissed as not a real concern? That's where things got intense. Senator Hawley wasn't letting this one slide. He read Isaacson's words back to him, challenging the idea that this tragedy was somehow irrelevant. He made it clear that the Senate was wasting no time in addressing cases like Laken Riley's through legislation. But Isaacson doubled down, suggesting the Laken Riley Act could actually cause harm because it might make minor crimes grounds for deportation. Seriously? Shoplifting is now the line we're drawing? That didn't sit well with Hawley, or frankly with me. Then Hawley brought up another gut-wrenching case. 12-year-old Travis Wolfe from his home state, also killed by an illegal migrant who had been unlawfully paroled into the U.S. Hawley made a powerful point. Crimes like these aren't isolated incidents. They are real issues that demand action. As a former prosecutor, he stressed the importance of detaining and prosecuting illegal migrants who commit violent crimes. And honestly, I think we can all agree that justice for victims like Travis Wolfe should be a priority. Now, this next part was eye-opening. Isaacson claimed the Remain in Mexico policy was a program of death. That's a pretty bold statement, but another witness, Mr. Cooch, strongly disagreed. He argued that the policy actually prevented abuse, human trafficking, and deaths along the dangerous migration route. Without it, cartels have been empowered like never before. Hawley pointed out that if this policy had been in place, Travis Wolfe might still be alive today. That's a chilling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for calling this hearing. Mr. Isaacson, if I could just start with you. In March of 2024, you wrote, "The murder of a nursing student in Georgia has a lot of people on the right talking about migrant crime like it's an actual issue." That'd be Laken Riley you were talking about?
Laken Riley was an unusual case.
Yeah, here, let's have a look. Here's Laken Riley.
Yes.
Her murder, her horrific murder at the hands of this illegal migrant who was also unlawfully paroled in the United States. Her death, not an actual issue?
It's a tragedy.
But not an actual issue?
Migrant crime is much less of an issue than U.S. citizen-committed crime.
Not an actual issue? Those are your words. Her death, not an actual issue. I just want to get, no, you say.
Of course it's an issue. It's a tragedy.
So what do you mean by your
murder is an
post?
issue.
It's not an actual issue, meaning we shouldn't be paying attention to it. Senate's wasting its time this week on the Laken Riley Act that would address the circumstances of her murder. What's your advice to us? We just discontinue those proceedings now?
I think the Laken Riley Act could do a lot of harm. It would allow me to say, oh, this person shoplifted, and that would be enough probable cause to get somebody deported.
Interesting. You're here, who invited you to this committee hearing today, Mr. Isaacson?
The minority party.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're here as a spokesman for the minority party. I just want to make sure the record's clear on this. The spokesman for the minority party is advising the Senate that the Laken Riley Act is a bad idea, and we ought to stop it.
Washington
The spokesman for the minority
opposes
party
death.
is saying that Laken Riley's death and migrant crime is not an actual issue. I can't frankly
I said migrant crime
believe
is not
that
an
I am
actual
hearing
issue.
these
I
words.
said
You
migrant
said it's
crime.
not an actual issue. I read you the
Laken
quote.
Riley's death was not an actual
You
issue. I
said that the
migrant
murder of a
crime
nursing
is an
student
actual
in
issue.
Georgia has a lot of people on the right talking about migrant crime. You put it in quotation marks, square quotes, like it's an actual issue.
Not
She's
Laken Riley's
dead
death.
because of migrant crime, right?
Migrant
Let's
crime
try
is
something
much
else.
less
Here, do you
of
know
an
who this
issue.
is? Do you know who this young man is?
I do not.
Travis Wolf, 12 years old, from my state, murdered by an illegal migrant who was also, like Jose Ibarra, illegally paroled by the last administration.
Is your expectation that zero migrants?
Let me tell you what my expectation is that those who commit crimes in this country will be appropriately dealt with, and that we should not be allowing migrants who commit crimes into this country, and that, yes, migrant crime that kills people like Travis Wolf, whose death was shocking, whose death is inexplicable, indefensible. I actually do think, yes, I think it's an actual, wait a minute, it's my time, Mr. Isaacson. I actually think, and I want the record to be clear on this, that migrant crime is a real issue. I think the Laken Riley Act is absolutely necessary. In fact, I propose an amendment to the Laken Riley Act that will cover people like Travis Wolf. I think that ICE ought to be required to detain those illegal migrants who commit violent crimes against children, like Travis Wolf. And yes, I happen to think, as a former prosecutor, I happen to think that their violent murders are actual issues. And the fact that you would say otherwise, sit here and advise the Senate that the Laken Riley Act is a bad idea, that the whole thing is not an actual issue, tell us what, made up, I think is outrageous. I think it's absolutely outrageous. And the fact that you were invited here to give this testimony is stunning to me, I have to say. Absolutely stunning to me. Mr. Cuccinelli, let me just ask you, something else that Mr. Isaacson has said is that the Remain in Mexico policy was a program of death. A program of death. Is that your experience, having seen it implemented? A program of death?
As part of implementing it, my answer would be no. It was quite the opposite. And as I said in my statement, that the deterrent effect for illegal aliens to come that was gained by the migrant protection protocols, Remain in Mexico program, prevented a lot more abuse, child abuse, abuse of women on the journey, and death along the way than any of the crimes that occurred addressed to the people where the people in Remain in Mexico were the victims. So anytime we have illegal immigration going on, we have victimization of that population. It would be my view, and I think the dollars play it out, especially as you've seen since 2019, that the idea that the cartels benefited from the Remain in Mexico program is relatively ludicrous compared to the alternative. And the alternative we've lived with the last 4 years has been the greatest enriching of the most evil, vicious people in the Western Hemisphere in the history of this hemisphere.
Yeah, I wish the Remain in Mexico program had still been in effect. When the killer of Travis Wolf crossed the border and was paroled illegally into the country, he might still be alive today. And if that's not an actual issue, I don't know what is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.